I was muted. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another webinar with Magoosh. If you are joining us live, please let us know where you're tuning in from. I always like to see the different time zones that we're all in. I'm in California, so I'm on Pacific Standard Time. And we will get started in just a couple minutes. I like to wait like 2 minutes to let people join. And today we're going to be talking about diversity statements and writing samples or supplemental writing samples for applications, graduate school applications. So we'll give it just another minute or so as people trickle in. And if you're watching the replay on YouTube, we will be going over diversity statements and writing samples, and then we're going to jump into a live Q&A. So there may be some questions answered that you have as well. So stay tuned for that, or fast forward to that if you're watching the replay. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Oh. Cool. Okay, cool. Yes, I'm getting better at using this platform. So, like I said, my name is Verónica, and I am an admissions expert with Magoosh. I'm also in my 4th year of my PhD program in the University of California at Santa Barbara. So I'm going to talk a little bit about diversity statements, and let's just get right into it. It's 12:02, so let people trickle in. And if you're with us, let me know where you're at, where you're streaming from. And also feel free to start putting those questions in the chat because I will get to them as soon as I'm done with this presentation. But let's get into diversity statements and writing samples. Oh, hi. My PhD is going well. Yeah, I'd say I'm more grounded. I know what I'm doing. I know what comes next. And I'm kind of getting closer to the ABD stage, which means all but dissertation, which means you've completed all of your requirements. All you got to do is bust out the diss. So I'm getting very close to that stage, and that's exciting. Oh, you're from India. It's the 27th. Oh my gosh. You're in the future. I'm just kidding. Also in India too. Bravo. Very cool. Very, very cool. Thank you for checking in with me about that. But let's get started here. So diversity statements and writing samples. So postdoc plan, I do have postdoc plans, and we'll talk about that. And I can talk more about one's postdoc too, more that goes on than I think people realize in the sense of your options. But let's get into the presentation, and then I'm happy to discuss my PhD and any other questions you all may have too. So what role does the diversity statement and writing sample play? So you may or may not be required to submit a diversity statement. It might be optional for you. I would say that if it's optional, I still encourage you to do it. But what does the diversity statement do? Sometimes students ask, is the information that I put in there, can it be used against me? What really should I be discussing? So the diversity statement and the writing sample allow the review committee to learn more about you, essentially, outside of the personal statement, the statement of purpose, your transcripts, your letters of rec. It's another opportunity for you to describe your reasons for pursuing the PhD. So your writing sample can speak to that, but not as directly. It's more an opportunity to demonstrate your writing abilities and your research questions and how you pursue them, as well as the diversity statement. And if the diversity statement is required for your application, it's likely that the program that you're applying to has ongoing initiatives and values regarding diversity. Yes, so there are differences between, as far as this question here, between the diversity statement and the personal statement. I will get to that specific question as soon as I finish the presentation, because that's a question that comes up a lot. So the reason why the diversity statement exists is because the department or the university has some kind of commitment to diversity or equity and inclusion, which support diversity. So they want to know your stance on it. They want to know if your research, your values, your commitments will also support the culture of the department or the institution. They want to know if you're going to basically contribute to that effort that is present within the department and the program or within the university wide. And allows you to give a statement dedicated specifically to diversity. And that can be a little challenging if you feel that your personal statement and your diversity statement are doing the same thing, but they are separate, because the diversity statement is about anything that you do outside of your research, outside of work and your professional endeavors. Is there anything else that you are committed to, that you contribute to, that you support, that increases diversity, whether in your community or somewhere else? It can be like an international effort as well, right? So writing samples demonstrate your writing style. So sometimes they might ask you for an optional writing sample. I highly recommend you submit one, even if it's optional, because it's just a way to say, this is the way that I write, this is the way that I approach my research, and this is kind of what I expect to build on and continue to develop. So how do both of these submissions impact your application? Well, the review committee will read these essays, and they will check to see if it's the diversity statement, how you responded to the prompts. That's like, the initial thing that they're checking for. And then they're looking to see what your commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion are, and the likelihood of you contributing to those efforts within the program. That's the key portion. What is the likelihood of you contributing to the initiatives within the program? How do you demonstrate likelihood? That's kind of confusing. Well, you demonstrate it based on your current commitments. What are you currently committed to? What are your current views? How does your research support this? So if that's already present, then there's a likelihood that you would be able to contribute that to the program. Likelihood is something that you demonstrate based on your current efforts and your current actions. So if you're describing your support of, your efforts to support first generation college students, based on your mentorship or other things like that you have done in the past, then there is a likelihood that you would be able to continue to contribute those efforts once you begin the PhD, if that makes sense, or the master's. And they're also looking for anything that strengthens your overall application based on the requirements of the program. So this is when you can slip in other things that perhaps are not being asked of you, but you still think are demonstrative of your preparedness for the program, of your preparedness for graduate school. And that can be a bunch of different things. In your supplemental in your writing sample, you can demonstrate that you work with different methods, that you work with different writing genres. And that's something that you can say in the personal statement or statement of purpose, but you're able to demonstrate it in the writing sample. You see the difference? And that also will demonstrate the maturity of your research approach or your research questions. Now, these writing samples are not supposed to be the most polished piece of writing. They don't need to be something that's been published. It's just something that allows the committee to kind of peer into the way that you write. So don't overthink it. You don't need the most perfect published chapter. That's not expected, because of course that's what you are taking on the program for, to learn how to do that. So how do you prepare for the diversity statement? So first and foremost, research what the department has to say about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The faculty members there, what their current work is in regards to that. Look at the university, the institution, see if they have a statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and look at current research efforts in the department. They might have some kind of metric where they measure diversity, equity, and inclusion within the department. And so that's something you want to be aware of. They might even be checking to see if you are aware of that. So always do your research. And then draft your response. So brainstorm, free write, diagram, whatever it is you need to do so that you can get your ideas on paper and so that you have an idea of where you're going. Go ahead and write your first draft. Bullet points are completely okay for your first draft. But as you continue to develop the essay, seek revisions from anyone that you can that, can speak to the clarity of the writing or speak to you as an applicant and say, hey, you kind of left this out. I think that's important, or you didn't really emphasize this enough and how important that is to you, things like that. For the supplemental writing, work with whatever essays you might have. I'm sure you've written some essays in undergrad that you might be proud of, that you think go a long way to demonstrate your research interests. Look through those first because you more than likely already have something you can work with. And then it's just about reviewing the essay and polishing it. So that might mean including more up-to-date sources, adding some additional sections if you think that's important, and in some way connecting to current research interests, the current research that you plan to pursue in your graduate degree program, or industry or technical studies. So go ahead, and you don't necessarily have to draft something brand new, but you can. I know people who have drafted something, written something brand new specifically for the application. And if you find yourself in that position, that's okay. Write something that you can elaborate on, that you can, that you are able to write towards, that demonstrates what you already know, what you've already been working towards, and demonstrates why you want to go into a program that can help you develop these ideas further. Done over perfect. Don't overthink it in the sense that you need something perfect. You don't. They don't expect to see something absolutely polished and ready for publication. They just want to see where your thinking is and what your current writing style is. And that's daunting, but just know that faculty understand that you're coming in to work on these ideas and work on your writing. So if it is optional, I still highly encourage that you submit something. It's not, if it's optional, it won't necessarily be used against you if you don't submit. But if it is optional, it's likely that many other applicants will submit something, and that can strengthen their chances of standing out against your application, and you don't want that. So still submit something, even if it's optional. If you're writing these essays from scratch, you're probably writing the diversity statement from scratch. This is the basic format that is probably the easiest to follow. So you want that introduction, you want that captivating intro sentence, that main point that articulates your thesis statement or what it is that you are going to be addressing throughout the paper. And for diversity statements, that can be your commitment to mentorship. Sorry, I have to sneeze. Your commitment to some other form of service or initiatives, anything that increases diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it can be something, I'm so sorry, I feel like I have to sneeze. Okay, excuse me. It can be something small, you don't need to demonstrate that you're saving the world, just something that you are committed to and have been consistent with that demonstrates that you are aware of the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That can be volunteer work, that can be a yearly beach cleanup, because of the importance of what that space provides, that beach, what are the origins, whose land is that on? Is that on Indigenous land? Is that something that you're aware of? Things like that. It can be your other commitments to increasing equity in a community center. You're interested in making sure that there are resources for undocumented people or for people whose first language is not English, right? anything like that. Just think about what it is that you do and that you're committed to, that you support, that drives diversity, equity, and inclusion in some way. And that can demonstrate what your current beliefs are about that, and that you're aware of what that means, really is essentially what that statement is supposed to do. You should have those body paragraphs that have your examples, they have your supporting evidence, and think about showing, not telling. So don't tell the committee that you really value diversity. And if you do say that, demonstrate how you value diversity, right? So just elaborating on the importance of diversity will not be enough for these statements. It's important that you also demonstrate that you understand how to put that into action. Okay. Always remember your transition sentences. That can go a really long way in captivating the reader and helping them follow through your entire essay and all of your ideas. And then for your conclusion, you want a clear summary of your argument and you want to rephrase it. So it's not supposed to be a copy of the introduction, and it's not supposed to just be a few sentences to kind of wrap it up. It's supposed to be a paragraph that helps the reader leave with the main argument and, if possible, feel a little bit more intrigued to know more about you. So there is an art to the conclusion paragraph, and I know a lot of students get frustrated with it. I always recommend to step away from the essay and then come back refreshed and read the essay again, and then you know kind of what you need to close it off strongly. Things to avoid. Okay. Oh, and revisions. Always seek out review support. If you cannot get that, I recommend you read it out loud to yourself. If you can print it, that would be great. Read it out loud and ask yourself, what is this sentence doing? Pause after each sentence and ask yourself, is this working towards something? Or is this causing confusion? Because you only have so much space to write. Things to avoid for the diversity statement. Only use census data or racial or ethnic descriptors if it's relevant to the story. So it's not important or it's not relevant for you to say, I went to a predominantly immigrant working class elementary school. If that's not relevant to how you contribute to diversity, equity, and inclusion, then do not include the racial or ethnic descriptor. Refrain from congratulating yourself for being around people that are different from you. That might seem like it demonstrates that you support diversity, equity, and inclusion, but that doesn't really, that's not really a strong way of demonstrating that. Refrain from congratulating yourself for having tolerance or acceptance of people who are different from you. Focus on what you have contributed to and what kind of efforts you have, or what kind of efforts you currently have towards driving and increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, in your community, on campus, really anywhere. And also now, a lot of this can be done digitally. You can be supporting efforts worldwide. I know a lot of you are international students, so don't be afraid to emphasize the things that you and your community or you and your family do to support community, to create networks and networks of support and care, because that does drive diversity, equity, and inclusion. So for a lot of international students, this prompt can be a little confusing because it's not clear why American universities care about this. But usually if you reflect on your current efforts to support community or things that you do to give back with understanding of why that's important, usually talking about that is going to be enough for a diversity statement. So focus on initiatives, focus on the values that you have in regards to this topic, and you should be fine. Okay, so a quick recap. Do your research on the program and the institution. What are their values in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion? Look for the diversity statement on the main website or within the program's website. And then prepare your own story, prepare your own response to the prompt. Know what it is, what your approach is going to be, and then seek out review once you get it on paper. These are the topics to focus on for a strong diversity statement. Personal initiatives, your personal commitments, your personal values, and your goals. It might be that you're working towards something in the future, right? Let's say you want to get a master's in computer science because you want to open a computer science program in your community back home where access to that is really scarce. That does drive diversity, equity, and inclusion within computer science. If that's a long-term goal and you're not there yet, that's okay. You can still elaborate on why you value that and why you're working towards that. Okay, so some of us do have like long-term goals and we're working towards them right now, but we just don't have like, we just don't have something that really demonstrates it quite yet, and that's okay. So organize your essay with an easy to follow format. And so for supplemental writing, the same thing goes, but when you're focusing on what you're going to submit for supplemental writings, focus on something that can demonstrate your current research interests. I know that the supplemental essay that I submitted is not connected directly to my research today, but there are overlapping themes and methods. And so I was aware of that. And I was able to say, this essay does not demonstrate my current research interests, but it does demonstrate the evolution of my research interests. So previously, I was focusing on biopatenting and extraction in the Amazon rainforest. Now I'm looking at that in Mexico in regards to birth. They are very different research topics, but they do have overlap, and I'm aware of how they overlap and how it demonstrates the evolution of my research. So it's okay if it differs. Just make sure that in some way, shape, or form, it does connect somehow. And if you feel that you do not have an essay at all that can do that, you may have to draft something from scratch, and that's okay because it doesn't need to be perfect. Remember that this is just to demonstrate your writing style and how you approach your research. Know what to avoid with the diversity statement. Avoid a self-congratulatory narrative. Focus on your efforts, your commitments, and your values, and on a self-reflective essay that demonstrates your understanding of the importance of diversity. Avoid using unnecessary racial or ethnic descriptors if they are not relevant to the story that you are telling. Okay, I hope that was helpful. We can get into the Q&A now. Let's see. Okay, I would love to answer this. Oops. Okay, so is the diversity statement similar to personal statement? Is there some differences we should be aware of? Yes, they are similar. I think for a lot of students, they find that they're pretty much talking about the same thing in the diversity statement and the personal statement. And that's probably because your research and your reason for going to graduate school does connect to diversity. It just naturally does. And that's based on your lived experience, based on who you are as a person. And that's fine. Just know that these essays are meant to do different things. Your personal statement, the focus of that essay is to give your personal statement on how and why you are prepared for the program. So you might want to get into more technical experiences, your experiences in undergrad or with your master's or in the industry that you're working in, and these experiences that have prepared you to now pursue the master's degree and now pursue the PhD. So you're demonstrating basically like what got you to this place in a way that demonstrates that you are prepared and that you are a competitive applicant for the program. The diversity statement usually is in response to some kind of prompt that the application will provide, and it is specifically to diversity. So it's not a space for you to tell your life story. because something about your personal narrative has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's not really the most effective way to utilize a diversity statement for your application. The diversity statement is intended to demonstrate what your current commitments and values are in regards to diversity and what the likelihood is of you contributing to that within the program. There may be content that overlaps in both of those essays, and that's okay. But I would say that when you're applying, try to refrain from using the same experience or the same narrative in multiple essays, because you are basically just retelling the same story to the committee when they're asking for something new. They're asking for something original. So if you find that it overlaps too much, it might be that you're using the same story in both of those essays. And that's okay if you are, but think about how you can use different examples and different experiences in those essays. Think about how you can use different terms, different language. Think about how you can, the thesis is supposed to be different. And when you have two different theses, when you have a thesis statement that is different for each essay, then your supporting evidence will also be different, right? I hope that's helpful. So follow-up question is, personal statement focused on the things in your life that led to you applying, and diversity statement is more where you have contributed to diversity. Yes. Now, in the personal statement, you might still be talking about diversity because you are committed to that, and that is your research interest, and that's okay. That's okay if you're still mentioning that in the personal statement, but just know that the essays have a different focus. And if you find that the content is the same, focus on what the essay is supposed to do. And that's exactly it. Your recap is perfect. Personal statement is things in your life that led to you applying, but also experiences that you've had that prepare you to apply. Diversity statement is what you have contributed to diversity and the likelihood that you will continue to contribute that once you start your PhD program. This is an interesting comment. My brother told me that diversity statement shines your applications. He completed his MS from NYU. Oh, I'd be interested if you could tell us more about that. Yes, not many programs ask for diversity statements. Mm-hmm. But it does happen. Yeah, anything, co-curriculums, absolutely. Anything that you are currently passionate about. And it can be unrelated to your research. Like, let's say you're really interested in, ethical coffee. You're really committed to making sure you get ethical coffee and all of the politics that go into that. And you want to increase that equity and inclusion within coffee production and, how that industry develops internationally. Like, I don't know, you contribute to that, you support that, you're interested in those politics, and you find a lot of value in that. Coffee is one of the most consumed products in the world. That's your interest. If that has nothing to do with your research, that's okay. You can still discuss that and demonstrate that you are passionate about it, that you think it's relevant, that you think it's important, that you have contributed in some way, even if that's not connected to the ways that you might drive diversity, equity, and inclusion within your program. It still demonstrates that you find value in that and that you understand, essentially. You understand what diversity means in the context of graduate school or in society at large. Okay. I think we're all caught up with questions, but I'm also open to answering any questions related to graduate school. They don't need to be about diversity or personal statements. Oops. Okay, we'll start this one. How do I know that a particular iteration of my SOP is the best one? There's always a doubt whether it can be better or not. Okay. Yes, there will always be a doubt of if these essays can be better or not. It's the nature of writing, you know. Even if you publish something, you're going to look at it and say, dang, I could have made that better. So I would say, as far as the SOP, you have a limited amount of time. If you are responding to the prompt in depth, that's how you know you have a good version. If you are creating a narrative that is easy to follow, that's how you know it'll be accessible to the people who are reading it. So that means like transition sentences, a clear organization, not a lot of jargon, you know, even if you think that you're applying, even if you know that the people who will be reading it are within your field, a lot of jargon can just cause the reader to lose interest, or you never know if someone who's reading it doesn't know the specifics of your research. So I don't recommend using a lot of jargon. And if you do, explain what it is, and that you have asked for someone to review your grammar and your writing. Your grammar and your spelling. So a lot of times when we're working on these essays, we're reading them again and again, and we're not catching simple typos or grammatical mistakes anymore because we've been looking at the document so many times. So as long as you've gotten a review from someone, I'd say that if you're checking off all of those things, your structure is great, the content is responding to the prompt, and you've had a review, I would say that you probably have a good version. Now, how do you know that's the version you're going to submit? How do you know that's the best one? There is no way to really know that, but at a certain point, you're going to have to submit it. And if you're answering the prompt and you're doing your very best to make it a polished piece of writing, I'd say that's how you know. You know, eventually you have to submit. And if you have a doubt if it can be better or not, and if you have enough time, let's say you still have a couple weeks, I would recommend, and this sounds kind of crazy, right? But I would recommend putting the version aside and drafting something brand new. As if you didn't write it at all. Draft something brand new, just let it come out. And then you might find that there are some sentences there. There are some words, descriptors that you're using there that just didn't make it into the other essay. And you can merge the two. That's a strategy that I use sometimes. I'm like, you know, this essay is like, it's okay, but it's just missing something. I'll put it aside and just kind of free write brand new again, like starting at square one. And you'd be surprised what can come of that you can then integrate into the other version. If you're feeling like this is a good version, but it's just not, it doesn't stand out enough, it's not strong enough, it's missing something, go back to the drawing board and start again and see if some sentences come out, even if it's just one sentence, literally, even if it's one sentence that comes out from a free write that is strong, that is captivating, that really explains something well, that's powerful and valuable. Put that into the new essay. You know, some of these essays, it's that those one or two sentences in the body paragraph that you're like, wow, that student really impressed me, you know? So if you want to see if something else can come out that is just not showing up within the present essay, it could be because you're looking at a document and you're already looking at these sentences and you just don't have the space for something new to emerge. Go to a new document. Just write out other things. Describe your research again. Describe your interest for pursuing the degree again. Start from fresh, and you might find some sentences or some ideas that are really powerful that you can merge into the other essay. I hope that's helpful. Okay. Hello, Emanuela. That's very pretty. I like that. My question is not related to diversity statements, though. Is it important to add my little research experience in my SOP if applying to an MBA or business-related master program? Okay. Well, you know, this is a question. This is something that's kind of up to your judgment. So you would need to look into the program and see what kind of applicants they're looking for. If it's an MBA or business related master program, you're probably not going to be working on research development there. It'll be more technical skills, looking more into the industry at large and preparing you for some kind of role. But if you feel that your research experience is something that allows you to speak to your interests for pursuing the degree, or an experience that you can say, I really learned this or that. I learned, how to work with other people. I learned how, like, strong communication skills. I learned how to collaborate. All of those skills that you learned from that research experience, guess what? They don't just disappear. They still translate to your master's program. That's the point, is whatever you have done up until now, the SOP, the statement of purpose, that's the SOP, the statement of purpose, the personal statement, the diversity statement, the supplemental writing, everything you are submitting is supposed to speak to how you have learned and gathered skills from different experiences that you will apply to graduate school. These are ways that you can demonstrate how prepared you are to pursue these degrees. And at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. In graduate school, a lot of the work that we do is independent. No one is there to ask you. You're not doing any homework. You might do a little bit in your first couple years, but no one's really monitoring you and making sure that you're doing your work. You're doing it on your own. And so you need to be able to demonstrate that you have that kind of discipline, that you have that capacity to pursue your own work, that you have enough interest in the work that you're doing to do it, right? And so if you have had research experience and that can demonstrate skills that you have gathered, understandings that you have now about how to work together, how to collaborate, how to communicate, how to follow through, then I would say definitely mention it. If you feel that there is another experience that demonstrates that better, then you might include that over the research experience. And that research experience nonetheless can still be on your CV or your resume, which usually MBA programs ask for a resume or a CV. So it's always about the strategy that you are employing as far as how you're creating a profile for yourself as an applicant. You have to remember that this review committee knows nothing about you. And you need to make things very visible to them about your interests, your skills, your experiences, and why you're applying. Make it as visible as possible. So if this research experience helps you to do that, then definitely include it. And if it doesn't, if it's just kind of like, meh, I didn't really, it was small. I can't really say that I learned anything that connects to why I'm applying now, or I think another experience does that better, then I would choose the other experience that demonstrates that best. Yes, we actually do have that service, and that is in one of our platforms. So there is an option where you can access essay review. And so one of our admissions experts will do line by line revisions for your essay, and then also kind of tell you, like, generally, this is what I think you're leaving out, or what you should work on, or I didn't see this, because you'll provide the prompt to us too. So I can drop if you go to our website, you can find all of that, and I'm going to put that in the chat right now. Okay, good. I'm glad that makes sense. Yeah, sometimes you're just looking for that other sentence that is just going to really make it pop, And when we're looking at a page that's already like a completed essay, it can be hard to know where to integrate that. Any other questions related to graduate school at all? I'm happy to answer anything about actually being a graduate student, my applications, anything related to applications at all. Doesn't need to be the diversity statement, doesn't need to be supplemental writing. Okay. How can I explain my low test scores in my essays? Yeah. Is this the standard test that you are required to take for the application, like the GRE or well, there's so many. Well, I would say if it's one of those exams, it depends. If you are basically right at the GRE, okay. First, you would need to know what the required score is for acceptance. And you can get that by contacting them, by contacting the program and asking them. It might say it on the website. Sometimes they say just as high as you can get. They're kind of vague about it. But you essentially want to know what the scores have been of students that have been admitted and where you're ranking on that scale. So that's important for you to figure out first. Once you figure that out, it depends on how far you are from that. If you're just a tiny bit under it, I perhaps would not mention it, but I would focus on drafting a personal statement and a statement of purpose that demonstrates and showcases who you are as a person and your research interests. It is possible for students to get into a program with a less than ideal score, but a really strong personal statement, a really strong, strong letters of rec and things like that, because, review committees do know that scores only represent so much of an applicant. Now, if your score is much below the expected score, then you might not qualify to apply. But that is dependent on the program. So if you're considering like where you fit in that, I would recommend reaching out to the program and letting them know what your current test score is and asking if they can provide. And when I say reach out to the program, reach out to the graduate advisor. Most programs will have a graduate advisor that can connect you either to the right person in the program to speak to in the department, or connect you to someone else at the institution or university to speak to. So, sorry, I was just reading these comments. So if you feel that your score is low enough where you need to address it, I wouldn't focus on it too much. Don't give it too much attention, because what you're doing is taking away, or you're giving attention to the low test score that could go to other experiences, your research, other things that prepare you, other things that make you a great applicant. You're not your GRE score. And although there is an expected score for students to be admitted, it is possible for you to be admitted if it's a little bit lower, as long as you can demonstrate that you have other that you are still prepared for the degree, that you do have other experiences that make you a well-rounded applicant and make you stand out. So I wouldn't give it too much attention. If you need one sentence to address it, go ahead and do that. How you can do that? Oh, okay. I'm reading this follow-up question here from the same user. The application pages of most of my desired universities say that the GRE scores are optional, but may improve my chances in certain cases if sent. Should I send them or not? I am in a dilemma. Okay, this is great. This happens to a lot of students. Not that this is great, but it's great to be able to talk about it. Okay. If it's optional, but you're already taking the test for another program where it is not optional, obviously you're still going to do your very best on that exam because there's other programs where it's not optional, it's required. So you're going to get as high of a score as you possibly can for the programs where it's required. For the programs where it's not required, I would still do my research to find out what the expected score is or what the average score is for admittance. If you are below that, significantly below that, I would not submit it. If you're slightly below it, I would submit it. And in the essay, I would address it. Maybe one sentence that says, well, I'm not going to tell you what to say, but one sentence that addresses, that score in what area category you scored lower than the average, just kind of letting it, addressing the elephant in the room. But if it's just slightly lower, I wouldn't even address it because all you're doing is drawing the review committee's attention to that, where you could be drawing their attention to other things that are unique and original and, amazing about you as an applicant. And that can be things that they want to know about you, why you're applying, what research you have done, or what you plan to do after you get the degree, how you came to appreciate this type of, industry or field. There are so many other things that you can address that would strengthen your application than to draw attention to a low test score. Depends how low it is. So this is a strategy. This is really a game of strategy. Like, it's optional. I scored just below the average. Should I submit it? It ultimately does depend on the feedback you get from the graduate advisor, what your final score is and how much below the average GRE admittance score is. And if you feel that you need to address it because of how relevant the material in the exam is to the program. Let's say you're applying for a PhD in math. If your math score is significantly lower, that might pose a problem. If you're not applying to math, you're applying for something in medical anthropology and your math score is a little low, it's not as relevant. You're likely not going to use any math in that PhD program, just an example. So why would you address it when you could be addressing something else that demonstrates that you are a stellar student, that you are prepared for the PhD, that you have plans after the PhD, that you are fully aware of what the program offers and why you're a great fit for it, the faculty you want to work with. Do you see what I'm saying? There's so much more that you can address aside from focusing on the fact that your math score is not that great, but you're not going to be using math in your PhD anyways. So this is a complex question because it's a game of strategy. And it depends on that program, what the required score is, the general score of previously admitted students, what your research plan is, all of that. So if you have follow-up questions on that, please go ahead and drop them because I know I gave you a lot of information. But you do need to develop a strategy as far as, and I did that too. So my GRE score was in math was not great. It was, I think it was below the average, but my writing and writing comprehension, reading and all of that was great. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not doing any math, haven't touched any math since I started my PhD. I did not address my math score. I did not address it at all. I submitted the supplemental writing that was optional. I spoke about my research experiences. I spoke about all of these other things that demonstrate that I'm prepared for the PhD now and that I know what kind of research I want to do. I know why I want to do it at the institution I'm applying to, all of these other things, because at the end of the day, they're going to look at that math score. They're going to see, okay, it's below the average, but what else does this applicant have to offer? Do you get what I'm saying? So I hope that's helpful. I tried to find the essay review service, but none available. Could you enlighten me on that? Absolutely. Let me pull it up from one of my previous webinars. Give me just a moment here. Okay, I found it. Okay, are you able to scan that QR code? Okay, let me know if you're able to scan that QR code. And I'm going to follow up with this question. If we want to apply for Masters in Computer Science, we do need a good quantitative score. Yeah, so I can't give you information as far as the Masters you're applying to and the score that you need to qualify for the program, because that's completely up to the program and the review committee. But you can get that information. So I would recommend contacting the program and asking to speak to the graduate advisor and letting them know your current situation, because they might tell you, oh, the average score for students is this, and you might be right there. Now, if they tell you that the average score is something that you're much below, then you know that, and they tell you that that score is important for the review committee, then you know what you're facing. So it all depends on the internal structure of that program and the way that they review their applicants. And that is something that can change year by year. That is something that can change dependent on how many people applied, right? So you want to contact them and get as much information as you can as you're applying. Because let's say you are a lot or significantly below that average score, then I would say you might want to address it in the essay in a way that says, I'm aware of this, but I also have all of these other experiences, all of these other reasons for applying that I think make me a strong applicant, right? So you're going to want to get that information directly from them. And if you can't get it from them, like let's say this has happened to me before when I was applying, they were just very vague with me. They said, just do, get the best score you can, get the highest score you can. Okay, but I want to know, like, am I even in a competitive, do I even have a competitive score to begin with? But you can find that out by speaking to current graduate students in the program. You can reach out to them. You'd be surprised how many would be willing to get back to you. A quick little email. Ask them, what they know about students who have been admitted and what their scores were. Ask them what their personal scores were. First, ask them if they're interested in speaking with you. And if they say yes, then you can go ahead and ask. And the idea of a good score, it's always dependent on the internal structure of the review committee. For some of them, they might say, this is the good score. And that might be different for another competitive master's in computer science in another state, in another country, so it depends on where you're applying and what they have decided is the required score to be admitted. Yeah. And I know that's hard because it's like, it could be different for every program. It could be changing. You could be just below and they might have a hard cutoff Or you could be just below and they say, if you still meet the other requirements and you have strong letters of rec, we'll still consider it. That is all dependent on their internal structure. Yeah. I would say if you're just below, I would still apply. If you think that you can get strong letters of recommendation and your essays are looking good and you're working on them, I would still apply, because you never know. There might, the students who apply this year as well might be very similar in their scores as yours. And so it always depends on who applies that year too. Okay. Yes. A lot of these things, there is no one size fits all, because every program is different and every applicant is different. You all have different things about you that make you a strong applicant. Your reason for pursuing the degree differs. You all have a different reason, a different motivation, a different passion. And those are the things that make you stand out as a student. You never know. You might be applying to work with a faculty member, if you're applying for a PhD, who says, oh, you know what, their research interest is enough. Their GRE score, I can overlook that based on, the compatibility of our research. Or, they already reached out to me. We spoke about the lab. Like, I can overlook that they only had 3 letters of rec when we recommended 5. There are different things we never know. And so it's just about kind of developing the best strategy you can. Okay, this is a good question. Yeah. Is it getting tougher? It's way more tougher than the questions in mock tests. I'm not a GRE expert, but we do have them at Magoosh. And what I do know about these exams is that, okay, so once you start the exam, depending on how many you're getting right, the questions do get harder. And that's because it's moving you into like a higher percentile, and that's how you get there, because you consistently answered harder and harder questions. Does that make sense? So if you're finding that it's a lot more challenging than the mock test, it's because the mock test is not able to do that for you, unless you have some kind of software or service that kind of mocks the exam in that way. If you're still taking like an exam on paper, a hard copy one, then you're not able to mimic that aspect of the exam. So if it does continue to get harder and harder, that could be an indicator that you've been getting some of the harder questions right. And so it's moving you into a higher, basically a more challenging exam. Because if you do really well in a more challenging exam and another student does poorly on an easier exam, well, that's the huge difference right there. I cannot comment on if it's getting tougher this year. I don't know enough about the evolution of these exams or how they decide which exam to use this year. But we do have GRE experts with Magoosh who know all about this and would be happy to. We also have a YouTube webinar about GRE test taking skills, and that might be useful for you. Actually, I learned a lot when I was contributing to that webinar. So go ahead and check that out on our YouTube. But there's no way for me to know if it's getting tougher this year. I hope not. I'm just kidding. I do hope it's not. But anyways, that's all the time that we have for today, everyone. I really enjoy these webinars with you all. And if you're watching our replay, thanks for checking us out. Check out our QR code, and we have a bunch of services, essay review, GRE prep, things like that can help you as you're applying. We also have a Discord server so that you don't have to go through this application completely by yourself. You can connect with other students and share resources. This last question here. I think most US programs that have optional GRE submission won't judge you too much on your score or lack of it. Yes and no, in the sense that it's optional, but they're still going to look at it. And if you scored, pretty low, it could still be a reason for them to consider your preparedness. If you scored really high, it could, or competitively, it could still be a reason for them to take a deeper look at your application. So they do still play a role, but at least you know that if you don't submit, that won't be held against you. When it's a required part of the application, if you do not submit the exam, your application will most likely not even be considered. If it's optional, they will still consider you. So still think about if you can get a good score, I would still submit it. Yes, and their follow-up comment was, if it's pretty low, it's probably better not to submit because they will be looking at it. Yeah. All right, well, this was a great webinar, everyone. Thank you for your engagement and all of your wonderful questions. I wish you the very best. Take good care.